a lot of times they have absolutely no energy. Well, if it's destroying your mitochondria, that would explain it, right? Because the mitochondria, this is where the energy of all life, humans, animals, plants, this is where the life energy is generated in the mitochondria, in the ADP process. Next slide, Joe, please. Also, in September of 2021, an Italian group of researchers had an article published in The Lancet. And this is one of their conclusions. As you see here, they said, we have demonstrated that the endothelium is a key target organ of SARS-CoV-2. Now, the purpose of their study was to try to figure out if they diagnosed SARS-CoV-2 as an endothelial disease, their conclusion was if that was a diagnosis, then that would allow them to create a framework for a therapeutic approach to the disease. If that makes sense, they said, look, whatever this animal is that's attacking the body, if we follow some rational diagnostic processes, identify this as an endothelial disease, then that gives us a rational framework to develop a treatment strategy. So this publication, their study, they tested the effects of orally administered L-arginine, which is an amino acid that occurs in lots of different kinds of foods. But they administered 3 grams of L-arginine orally in a double-blind study twice a day to half their clinic population. And they were testing this out in hospitals with severe COVID patients. So half the patients got a placebo, the other half received 6 milligrams of L-arginine a day. Those folks that were taking the L-arginine, their hospital stay was half the duration of those who took the placebo. And they actually left the hospital. So their conclusion was that, as you see on the lower statement here, L-arginine restores endothelium function. So they're trying to figure out, well, what's the connection between L-arginine, orally administered to these patients, these severe COVID patients, and the refunctioning of the endothelium, the termination of its dysfunction and the cause of its functionality again. Well, so here's an answer. L-arginine as an amino acid is the primary fuel for the endothelial cells to produce nitric oxide. All the endothelial cells that we've been talking about, this inner layer, single cell inner layer of all your blood vessels, all your lymph vessels, they produce nitric oxide. And the fuel that they need to do that is L-arginine. And so as a consequence of this Italian study, they actually they proved it. So that became obviously very relevant for us because the primary ingredients in Cardio Miracle are several types of amino acids, including L-arginine and L-citrulline. We've had 2 years of research done on this product to establish its efficacy and its ability to affect the functionality of endothelial cells and to reverse endothelial cell dysfunction. So I want to take a look at first the first research that we had done at Ohio University. It was an in vitro study by Tadeusz Maliński, who has published more than 300 peer-reviewed articles there and is recognized as a specialist in nitric oxide and vitamin D. His lab actually, Magdalena, was the first lab in the world to measure in real time the production of nitric oxide by human endothelial cells. So a formidable intellect and inventor at Ohio University. So these are some of the statements from his study. Number one is that because he tested this our cardiomiracle formula on human endothelial cells that he took from several different places in the body, including inside the heart. The heart has very specific endothelial type cells in its interior. So his first conclusion, one of his primary conclusions, was that endothelial cells that are bathed in cardiomiracle are instantly stimulated to produce and release nitric oxide. And that cardiomiracle significantly improves endothelial function rapidly, where there's a previous dysfunctional characteristic. Next slide, Joe. So this is the magazine, the medical research magazine the article was published in. It was in this here, Pharmacognosy Research, in February of 2020. This peer-reviewed study was published. You'll note that he says here, the bottom line in preserving the function of the cardiovascular system is to maintain long-term a proper ratio between cytoprotective nitric oxide and cytotoxic oxidative stress. This ONOO molecule is what's called the peroxynitrite molecule. So one of the things, Magdalene, that he found when testing cardiomiracle was that the production of nitric oxide creates a byproduct, inevitably. And that byproduct is the most dangerous free radical in the human biological system. It's called peroxynitrite. When he was researching cardiomiracle, he found that the nitric oxide production levels from the endothelial cells were enormously high, 6 times higher than anything he had ever seen for over a duration of 24 hours. And he had never seen endothelial cells produce nitric oxide over that period of time, maybe 3 or 4 hours, but never over 24 hours. So he was fascinated with this because the production of healthy, free bioavailable nitric oxide was so high and for such a long period of time, which has enormous human benefits. At the same time, he noticed that the production of the dangerous free radical molecule, the peroxynitrite, was dramatically reduced in comparison to the amount of nitric oxide produced. So he said there's this a beautiful and magic ratio between these two different molecules, one that is absolutely that's cytoprotective or cell protective, which is the nitric oxide, and one that is cell toxic, the cytotoxic molecule, this peroxynitrite. And he says this wonderful ratio that cardiomiracle causes in his in vitro study was this high production of nitric oxide and low production, downregulated peroxynitrite. Well, why is this relevant? Why is nitric oxide relevant in the human body? When we're young, our bodies produce plenty of it. And as we age, we have toxins that are both internal and external. So when we're in our 30s, the endothelium, its ability to produce nitric oxide begins to decrease. And so our nitric oxide levels go down. And as a consequence, we begin to experience symptomologies like strokes and diabetes and heart attacks, neurological diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, because these endothelial cells are the cells that signal health, that signal to the blood vascular when to flex and to stay flexible. In the United States, the largest killer of humans is cardiovascular disease, right? Mm-hmm. Atherosclerosis is one of those cardiovascular diseases, the stiffening or hardening of the arteries. That's what happens to our vasculature when they're not producing nitric oxide. They lose their flexibility. They become hard and stiff. The endothelial cells are also built to prevent aggregation of platelets, to prevent aggregation of the lipids and other material that's flowing in the blood. In fact, the endothelial cells also, this is fascinating. I remember reading it for the first time. The endothelial cells encourage the blood to stay liquid. They're the only cell that encourages the blood to maintain its liquid characteristics. All other cells, when they come in contact with blood, encourage it to become a solid. So the health of the endothelium is pretty clear. When it's healthy, your blood moves quickly. The interior of your blood vessels stays clean. They stay unclogged. So you have healthy blood pressure, you have a healthy blood supply, you have high oxygen levels in the blood. One of the problems with that we've seen over the last 2 years is that people that suffer from this SARS virus can't get enough oxygen. And they're put on ventilators and then they die. You say, why, if you're putting more oxygen into the system, why isn't the body assimilating the oxygen? And their oxygenation levels continue to go down even though oxygen was being supplied to the body. Well, the reason was because their endothelial cells were damaged and they couldn't transmit the oxygen from inside the blood to the gas membrane barrier. It couldn't be assimilated. So you're pumping oxygen, the same amount of oxygen that's going in is being expelled out the body, none of it being used. So you have this, again, when your endothelial cells are unhealthy and damaged, you suffer ischemia, or in other words, the loss of oxygen in the blood. So the healthy endothelium also maintains the healthy blood, not only healthy blood viscosity, but the blood's ability to carry sufficient oxygen in the red blood cells. It actually increases the red blood cells' ability to carry more oxygen and then to deliver it. So you see on the slide here just a few more relevant statements from this in vitro study that nitric oxide restores the function of a damaged cardiovascular system. And the cardiovascular system doesn't just involve our blood vascular, but it includes the lymphatic system and the hepatic system. So our cardiovascular system is the system by which our body receives input. And the lymphatic system, as you know, is the system that takes the garbage out of the body. So both those systems function as a result of either a healthy or a damaged endothelium. So that's what was discovered. Those are some of the findings from the in vitro study at Ohio University with Professor Malinsky. We next, in the fall of 2021, retained a biological analysis firm by the name of Emergent Systems Analytics that uses artificial intelligence to conduct what is called in silico research with what they call a spectral clustering methodology. So what's fascinating about this is that even the FDA has recognized that in silico research, they support it because it provides, how shall I say, the predictive value of in silico research is equivalent to the predictive value provided by in vivo clinical research. So in vivo clinical research, you're using live animals, right? You're using live either animals or humans. In silico research is mathematical modeling. And so what in this type of research, specifically when they took a look at CardioMiracle to test all of its ingredients, the data source for this research, Magdalena, was the entire corpus of all published medical studies on every ingredient in CardioMiracle. which is over 17 million